Welcome back to Cricket Central, the podcast where we discuss all the stories, big and small, for the first day recap today from the first test of Australia against West Indies over at Optus Stadium in Perth. It was an interesting day where Australia won the toss and chose to bat. And really, by the end of the day, gained ascendancy in this match. It was 1 for 72 at lunch in a tight first session, with David Warner being the only one to fall for 5 runs. But in the second session, Australia got fairly on top, and they were 2 for 162 by tea. We thought there was perhaps a little bit of a fight back in the last few overs before tea, where they managed to dismiss Usman Khawaja, and there were a couple of other chances there as well. But then that third session, Australia really capitalised on the hard work early on, I think you would have to say. And by the end of the day, they ended on 2 for 293, with Marnus Labuschagne bringing up yet another century, 154 he ends on, and Steve Smith on 59. Got Ethan Prabs with me here. Ethan, how did you see the first day?
Very solid day for Australia. I think if you'd asked Australians what the perfect day of cricket looks like, we pretty much got it. It was a nervy start with Warner being dismissed early, playing a loose shot through the covers. But as an Aussie fan, you love watching the Marnus and Steve Smith show. And the commentators hyped it up to a significant extent. And it was good watching both of them batting probably in some of the most fluent fashion that we've seen from them in a number of years. And I think that's really positive to see. They are, of course, the backbone of this batting lineup, and two players who not only score runs at home, but have been historically quite good away. So it'll be good to have them in form when we take on South Africa and build into a World Test Championship.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point. I think Marnus brought up his eighth century in his career already. We sometimes forget he really hasn't been around for that long. And there was an amazing stat going around that after 29 tests, he has reached 50 or above 21 times out of 29, which is a new record for the Australian team, eclipsing Steve Smith's previous record of 20 50 plus scores in 29 tests. So really, he's had, you would almost have to say, a little bit of a blip. Well, that's sort of what we thought for most of this year, but actually, when you do look at it, he's still going pretty well, and I think he just cemented that fact yet again today. And as you say, Smith looking pretty good also. From the West Indies side of things, well, they bowled very tight early on, didn't they? I remember, I think I was saying to Pearson during the coverage, it was almost a little bit like deja vu of last summer. England, they came here, and especially in the first couple tests, they sort of went to that sort of back of a length a little bit, slightly too short to really challenge the batsman much, but bowled very tight, didn't let many runs. And it was almost sort of the same again today. And while it was tight, would you agree you just didn't really feel that they were challenging us as much as you probably should be on day one of a test match?
Yeah, spot on. I think the way you describe it, it sounds a lot like the first day of the Adelaide Ashes test
Mm.
last year that we were in attendance of, and England were a bit too short. It was famous for Root failing to control his senior quicks, and I think Australia ended up at about 2 for 200 or something at the end of that day as well, and Marnus went on to hit another 100 there too. So I mean, there's a lot of similarities that can be drawn. I think the issue with that attack and probably this attack is it lacks a bit of firepower and a bit of potency. Um, you feel with Mark Wood steaming in that that pace makes things happen. I don't get the same energy from someone like an Alzari Joseph. He's a little slower, a little less bounce off the pitch. And while some of their bowlers did get a little bit of movement, it all looked fairly comfortable for the Australians. So it was tidy and economical from the West Indies, but you're right. I don't think they were ever really in control or dominating the game there, or looked like a decent chance of getting a wicket. And I think from an Australian perspective, it was just a case of being patient and then cashing in later on. And that's what they did. I think any time people straight onto the pads of Steve Smith, he put them away. but he was also willing to leave and be tentative towards the offside. So it was good, patient Australian batting and a West Indies attack that probably has some questions to answer, because I don't think they've figured out how they're going to get 20 wickets.
Yeah, and as we said, I think last year in the Adelaide Test as well, a lot of credit does have to go to the Australians for sticking it out, even when the bowling was tight. I think at one point Labuschagne went 17 balls without scoring. I think that was Holder bowling at that stage, but they stuck it through and there were runs in the end. I guess the question for West Indies, which you alluded to, is: do you think they could have bowled more aggressively, or do you think this is sort of a case of they know that they're not really the bowling lineup that's going to be able to take wickets quickly? So it's sort of a case of just making the game go long by keeping the runs down.
Yeah, I think they're in a tricky position. I think they showed good signs of attack early on in the day with the five slips, new ball. Sells was bowling with some energy and charging in. But yeah, you do sense when players like Holder and Mayers are on that it is a bit of preservation and a bit of safety bowling and hoping that the Aussies make a mistake. I think on this wicket, which did look pretty good for batting, while there was some movement, the lack of pace of the West Indian bowlers meant that that movement probably didn't make things dangerous for the batsmen. And I think they're really suffering here from a lack of a quality spinner. I think if they had a leggy or an offie who could really hold up an end and make things happen, you're always in the game. But I think Roston Chase is a massive letdown, and he was loose today as well. So honestly, if you chuck Nathan Lyon in this West Indies team and give Australia Roston Chase, then the picture might look a lot different.
Yeah, and just yet another similarity to that Ashes series last year. You got to remember the first test in Brisbane, Jack Leach getting hammered everywhere. Roston didn't get hit quite as badly today, but he was basically the equal most expensive of the bowlers with Jaden Seals, and did let off a bit of pressure you felt when he was bowling. Just to go through a couple of the West Indies stats, Kyle Mayers was really the pick of the bowlers in terms of his figures. 1 for 24 he got in the end, picking up that wicket of Kawaja just before tea. 1 for 63 for Jaden Seals, none for 59 for Kemar Roach, none for 46 for Hazari Joseph. So all pretty tight, as we say. But Jaden Seals getting that wicket of Warner, there will be questions asked, starting to be asked a little bit more frequently of David Warner, who has had a bit of a lean patch, really, all things considered, going back last summer in the Ashes, a couple of 90s, but never really kicked on. And in the tours to Pakistan and Sri Lanka, a couple of 50s, but again, I think he's averaging about 30 for the past year and a bit or something. Are some questions being raised about David Warner's place in the side?
I don't think his spot is in jeopardy just yet, but you're right. You see talk of it emerging from the surface. It's actually quite interesting that you could almost say Warner, Labuschagne, and Steve Smith are all in that sort of lean patch. But after Marnus's knock today, he looks good to go. Steve Smith, there's a lot of hype about how he feels invincible, and certainly indication of the last couple of knocks suggests he's back. But David Warner is still where the questions lie. I don't really think we'll be too keen on bringing Harris back into the side. But certainly Matt Renshaw's showed some promise at the domestic level with a couple of scores. I think he made over 180 runs for one dismissal in that practice game. So if Warner does have a quiet summer, I wouldn't be surprised if questions get asked at the back end of it. But it is important for him to take this chance against this more tame West Indies lineup, because I think South Africa will be a formidable challenge.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I think the thing is, when you look at some of his dismissals, he doesn't really look like someone who's that out of form. He's been batting pretty well in other formats as well. Even that one today just was trying to force it a bit, chopped on. You could almost say he was a little unlucky today. So I think we can maybe wait a little bit for Warner before we make the big move of dropping him, especially considering the history that he has had throughout his career. Okay, we're just looking on to tomorrow. What are you sort of projecting Australia will do in terms of how long we'll bat? Do you think is there any chance of a West Indies fight back? And getting Australia out for anything less than 400? Do you think that's possible, or do you think Australia is really in position to set this up with, maybe even a 500 total or something?
Yeah, I think something like 500 will be the goal. Interestingly, Marnus Labuschagne has of his last 300s failed to pass 110. So he's certainly back scoring the big daddy tons as they are called. So his focus will be looking into the 200s potentially. But Australia will be largely thinking the same as today, just batting long periods of time, keeping wickets in hand. I mean, they've scored in excess of 3 runs and over, and they might choose to slightly up that rate. But certainly, I'm expecting aggression from Head, Green, and Carey after these two are done at the crease. And I think Australia will probably be looking to bat for 75 or so overs and send the West Indies in for a tricky patch at the end of the day. If they do manage that, they'll probably close to double their score. So we might be seeing something around the 550, maybe even 600 mark, depending on how the Aussies go. And I wouldn't be surprised if they did declare a little bit earlier if things are going well, also, and give themselves a full session at the end, um, at this Perth ground with a bit of bounce.
Yeah, Travis Head loves these sort of conditions when when people have already made a few runs as well, doesn't he? So yeah, I would expect him to go out all guns are blazing there. Final question. I'm going to put you on the spot a bit here. I'm not even sure if you watched the Channel 7 coverage, but Justin Langer, big news, in a commentary position now. He went around and shook hands with all the Australian players, which sort of poured cold water on the rumours that he had fallen out with all of them pretty quickly, actually. But what did you think of his first day in the commentary seat?
Yeah, luckily I have been tuning in on Channel 7. I thought JL was he had a pretty good day in the box. Some insightful commentary, and I think he had good comments on the players, and it did seem from the clips that they did show that he still had a pretty warm relationship with them all. And they seemed pretty cheerful to see him. He did mention Usman Khawaja's two beautiful daughters about 15 times, so I thought that was interesting. But aside from that, when the focus was on the cricket, I thought he had a good stint in the box, and I'm enjoying the Langer Ponting combination.
Mm. Yeah, yeah, I agree. Actually, I would normally switch over to Fox pretty quickly in the day, but I stuck with Channel 7 today. So yeah, that's good. All right. Well, thanks for coming on, Ethan. We'll be back tomorrow. Hopefully, a little bit more of a even day tomorrow. Anyway, thank you all for listening. Goodbye.